I don't usually remember my dreams. Most nights, they slip away like smoke, fading before I even open my eyes. But this one has been haunting me for weeks. It's the kind of dream that claws at the back of your mind, refusing to let go, no matter how hard you try to push it away. It started in a place I'd never been, or so I thought. The air was thick, almost suffocating, like the weight of 1,000 forgotten memories pressing down on me. I was standing in a long, dim hallway, the walls cracked and stained with something dark and unidentifiable. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting shadows that twisted and writhed like living things. At the end of the corridor was a door, old and rusted, with a faded sign barely legible, Dream Incubation Facility. The words felt wrong, like they didn't belong in the world I knew. I reached out to touch the door, but before my fingers could graze the cold metal, the floor beneath me gave way. I fell, not down, but through layers of shifting colors and shapes, faces that blurred and screamed silently, whispers that echoed in a language I couldn't understand. The sensation was both terrifying and hypnotic, like being pulled into a nightmare I couldn't wake from. When I finally landed, I was inside a room filled with strange machines, tubes, wires, and screens flickering with static. The air smelled of antiseptic and something else, something rotten. In the center of the room lay a figure, motionless, hooked up to the machines. Their face was obscured, but I could feel their fear, their pain. Then the lights went out. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat, heart pounding like a drum in my chest. The room around me was dark and silent, but the echo of that dream lingered, thick and heavy. I sat on the edge of my bed, trying to steady my breathing, but the images wouldn't fade. I can't stop thinking about what I saw. The facility, the machines, the figure. There's something deeply wrong there. Something no one talks about. And I'm not the only one. I've been digging through old forums, obscure posts, and forgotten news articles. Whispers of the Dream Incubation Facility keep popping up, stories of people who went in and never came out the same, or didn't come out at all. Some say it was a government experiment gone horribly wrong. Others believe it was a front for something far darker. Whatever the truth is, it's buried beneath layers of silence and fear. And now, it's pulling me in. I don't know why this place has such a hold on me. Maybe it's the dream, or maybe it's something I've been avoiding for years. But I can't ignore it anymore. Tomorrow, I'm going back. I'm going to find that facility, walk those cracked hallways, and uncover what's really inside. Because if I don't, I'm afraid the dream will never let me go. And maybe, just maybe, neither will whatever's waiting for me there. Before I decided to chase down the nightmare that had taken root in my mind, I needed to understand what this place really was. The Dream Incubation Facility wasn't just some abandoned building with a creepy name. It was, or at least claimed to be, a cutting-edge research center dedicated to something called Dream Incubation. Dream incubation, as I found out, is a real but controversial technique. The idea is simple in theory. By influencing a person's dreams, you can guide their subconscious to solve problems, unlock creativity, or even treat psychological trauma. It's been around in various forms for decades, mostly in academic circles and experimental therapy. But this facility took it to a whole other level. Officially, the Dream Incubation Facility was established in the late 1970s, funded by a mix of private investors and government grants. Its stated mission was to explore the potential of dreams as a gateway to the human mind, how they could be manipulated, recorded, and maybe even controlled. The research was supposed to revolutionize psychology and neuroscience. On paper, it sounded like something out of a sci-fi novel. Scientists in white coats, advanced machines designed to monitor brainwaves, and volunteers who willingly submitted themselves to nightly sessions of dream guidance. The facility was equipped with state-of-the-art technology for its time, e.g. caps, sensory deprivation chambers, and experimental devices that claimed to incubate specific dream content. But as I dug deeper, the clinical gloss started to peel away. The more I read, the more I found whispers of something darker lurking beneath the surface. Official records are frustratingly sparse. The facility operated for less than a decade before it was abruptly shut down in the mid-1980s. The reasons for its closure are vague. Officially, it was due to funding cuts and ethical concerns. But the trail goes cold after that. No detailed reports, no public investigations, no clear explanation. Just silence. And that silence is where the rumors thrive. Local legends speak of strange occurrences, volunteers who vanished without a trace, patients who emerged from sessions catatonic or worse, claiming they had been trapped in their own nightmares. Some say the facility was experimenting not just with dreams, but with something far more sinister. The manipulation of consciousness itself, blurring the line between reality and hallucination. I found forum posts from people who claimed to have had family members involved with the project, people who warned me to stay away, saying the place was cursed or haunted by the memories of those lost inside. Others spoke of a shadowy figure, a dream warden, who supposedly controlled the facility's darkest secrets. It's hard to separate fact from fiction, but the pattern is clear. Something went horribly wrong. This wasn't my first dive into the world of abandoned horrors and forgotten experiments. I've covered cases before, places where science and the supernatural collide, where the human mind is pushed beyond its limits. But the Dream Incubation facility felt different, more personal, more urgent. Maybe it's because the dream that woke me up that night wasn't just a random nightmare. It felt like a message, a warning that I started piecing together what little information I could find, old newspaper clippings, declassified documents, and interviews with former employees who spoke on the condition of anonymity. They described a place where the boundaries between waking and dreaming were deliberately blurred, where subjects were pushed to explore the darkest corners of their minds. One former technician mentioned the incubation chamber, a sealed room where subjects were exposed to sensory stimuli designed to induce specific dream states. According to her, some volunteers reported seeing things that shouldn't exist, figures lurking just beyond perception, voices whispering secrets no one was meant to hear. Another source, a retired psychologist, hinted at experiments that went beyond therapy. He spoke of attempts to implant ideas, memories, even entire personalities through dream manipulation. The ethical implications were staggering, and many staff members left in protest. But the most chilling detail came from a leaked internal memo, dated just weeks before the facility's closure. It referenced unexplained phenomena and subject disappearances, urging immediate cessation of all experiments. The memo was never made public, and no follow-up investigation was ever announced. What happened inside those walls? Why did the project end so suddenly? And why does the place still cast such a long shadow over the town? These questions gnawed at me, pulling me deeper into the mystery. The more I learned, the more I realized that the Dream Incubation facility wasn't just a relic of failed science. It was a doorway to something no one was prepared to face. And now, it was calling me back. That I knew that to understand the dream that wouldn't let me go, I had to see the place for myself. To walk those cracked hallways, to touch the cold metal of that rusted door, and maybe, just maybe, to uncover the truth buried beneath decades of silence and fear. Because some secrets don't stay buried forever, and some nightmares are waiting for you to come back. The moment I stepped inside, the air changed. It was like crossing an invisible threshold, a boundary between the world I knew and something else, something older, darker, and utterly unwelcoming. Outside, the sun was bright, the sky a clear blue, birds chirping lazily in the distance. But inside the Dream Incubation facility, the light was swallowed whole, replaced by a suffocating gloom that clung to my skin like a wet shroud. The front door groaned as I pushed it open, its rusted hinges protesting after years of neglect. The smell hit me first, a thick, sour stench of mold, dust, and something metallic, like old blood or rusted machinery left to rot. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breath. This place wasn't just abandoned. It was decaying, falling apart piece by piece, as if the building itself was trying to forget what had happened here. The lobby was a cavernous space, once sterile and clinical, now a graveyard of peeling paint and shattered glass. Faded posters about dream research and unlocking the mind's potential hung crooked on the walls, their optimistic slogans mocking the silence that had settled over the place. The floor was littered with debris, broken tiles, scraps of paper, and the occasional unidentifiable object half buried in dust that I flicked on my flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness like a knife. Shadows danced along the walls, twisting and stretching in ways that made my skin crawl. I told myself it was just my imagination, but every instinct screamed that I wasn't alone. As I moved deeper into the building, the temperature dropped noticeably. My breath came out in shallow puffs, and I pulled my jacket tighter around me. The silence was absolute, broken only by the faint creak of the floorboards beneath my feet and the distant drip of water echoing somewhere far away. I rounded a corner and froze. Scrawled on the wall in what looked like dried blood was a symbol, a circle intersected by jagged lines, almost like a broken clock face. I'd seen it before, in some of the old documents I'd found online. It was the unofficial emblem of the facility's most secretive project, something the staff never talked about openly. A sudden noise made me jump, a low, guttural growl, or maybe a groan, coming from somewhere deeper inside. My heart hammered in my chest as I spun around, flashlight beam darting wildly. Nothing, just the empty hallway stretching out before me, swallowing the light. I swallowed my fear and pressed on, telling myself I was here for answers, not ghosts. Near the end of the corridor, I found a door marked staff only. The paint was chipped, the sign hanging crooked, but the lock looked newer than the rest of the building. I jiggled the handle, locked. Just then, a voice behind me made me jump again. "You shouldn't be here." I turned slowly to see a man standing in the shadows, his face partially obscured by a baseball cap pulled low. He looked like he'd spent too many years under the sun, his skin weathered and rough. His eyes, sharp and wary, locked onto mine. "I'm just curious," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I want to know what happened here." He snorted, a bitter sound. "Curiosity's a dangerous thing around here. You don't know what you're messing with." "Maybe," I admitted, "but I can't just walk away. Not after what I've seen." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Name's Carl. I'm one of the few who still keeps an eye on this place. Not that it does much good." "Why do you stay?" I asked. "Because some things don't die easy, and some people never learn." Carl's warning hung in the air as he stepped back into the shadows, disappearing as suddenly as he'd appeared. I was left alone again, but his words echoed in my mind. I moved on, my flashlight catching glimpses of old equipment, rusted beds, broken monitors, tangled wires hanging like vines from the ceiling. The deeper I went, the heavier the atmosphere became, as if the building itself was breathing, watching. Then I found it, a narrow stairwell leading down into darkness. The steps were crumbling, but I could see faint light flickering below. I hesitated, heart pounding, but something pulled me forward. At the bottom, I discovered a door unlike the others, solid steel, with strange symbols etched into its surface. The air around it was colder, almost electric. I pressed my hand against the metal, and a shiver ran up my spine. I found something no one was supposed to see. Behind that door lay a hidden room, untouched by time. Inside, strange machines hummed faintly, their screens flickering with static. Papers and notebooks were scattered across a desk, filled with frantic handwriting and diagrams that made little sense but hinted at experiments far beyond anything I'd imagined. And then, in the corner, a small tape recorder sat blinking, as if waiting for someone to press play. I knew this was just the beginning. Whatever secrets this place held, they were buried deep, and they were far from finished with me. What I heard on that tape still haunts me. I remember the moment I pressed play, the small red light blinking steadily as the crackling voice filled the stale air of the hidden chamber. The room was cramped, walls lined with strange machines, some humming faintly, others silent and cold like forgotten relics. Papers were scattered everywhere, yellowed with age, covered in frantic handwriting and diagrams that looked like the fevered scribbles of someone losing their grip on reality. At first, I was just a curious investigator, a skeptic armed with a flashlight and a notebook. But as the voice on the tape unfolded, my scientific curiosity began to unravel, replaced by a creeping horror I couldn't shake. The recording was a series of logs, apparently made by one of the lead researchers. The voice was calm, clinical, but the words told a different story. They spoke of subjects who had volunteered for dream incubation experiments, sessions designed to implant specific dream content, to manipulate the subconscious mind. The goal was to unlock hidden memories, solve psychological trauma, even enhance creativity. But then the tone shifted. The researcher's voice grew tense, almost fearful. They described subjects who didn't just dream, they became trapped. Their minds fractured, unable to distinguish between dream and reality. Some stopped responding altogether, lost in endless nightmares. Others reported seeing entities lurking in the shadows of their dreams, figures that whispered secrets no one was meant to hear. One entry chilled me to the bone. A subject who, after a session, claimed to have seen the warden, a shadowy figure who controlled the dreamscape, punishing those who tried to escape. The researcher dismissed it as hallucination, but the fear in their voice betrayed their doubt. As the tape continued, the logs grew more erratic. The researcher spoke of unauthorized experiments, pushing subjects beyond ethical limits. They mentioned incubation chambers, where sensory deprivation and electrical stimuli were used to force specific dream states. The goal was no longer therapy, it was control. And then came the disappearances. The tape ended abruptly, the last words a frantic warning. We've gone too far. The subjects are changing. The facility is no longer safe. Shut it down before it's too late. I sat there, the tape recorder's red light blinking in the silence, my mind racing. This wasn't just a failed experiment. It was something else entirely. There's more than just experiments here, something else. I'd read the theories online, forums filled with people piecing together fragments of the facility's dark history. Some believed the researchers had stumbled onto a way to access a hidden layer of consciousness, a place where the rules of reality bent and twisted. Others thought the facility was a gateway, a thin spot between worlds where nightmares could bleed into waking life. It reminded me of other cases I'd covered, places where science and the supernatural collided, where the human mind was pushed beyond its limits and paid a terrible price. The Dream Incubation facility fit that pattern perfectly. As I sat in that room, surrounded by the remnants of forgotten horrors, I felt a shift inside me. A subtle pressure behind my eyes, a whisper at the edge of my hearing. The air seemed to thicken, the shadows deepening. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just the power of suggestion. But over the next few days, strange things began to happen. At first, it was small, glimpses of movement in the corner of my vision, fleeting shadows that vanished when I looked directly. Then came the dreams. Not the vivid nightmare that had started this, but something different, fragmented, disjointed visions that left me disoriented and exhausted. I found myself waking up in the middle of the night, heart racing, unable to tell if I was awake or still trapped in some twisted dreamscape. The line between reality and nightmare blurred, and I began to question my own sanity. I reached out to the community, sharing what I'd found, hoping for answers or at least some reassurance. But the responses were mixed. Some warned me to stop digging. Others urged me to keep going, convinced that the truth was worth the risk. One commenter mentioned a dream warden figure, echoing the tape's warnings, and another linked the facility to a series of unexplained disappearances in the area. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture they formed was more terrifying than I'd imagined. I'm not sure how much longer I can hold on to what's real. The more I uncover, the more the darkness creeps in, not just around me, but inside me. There's something in that facility that doesn't want to be found. Something that's already reached out and touched me. And I'm afraid it's only just beginning that I couldn't tell if I was awake or still dreaming. That's the first thing I need you to understand. Because once the line between reality and nightmare starts to blur, everything else falls apart. You wake up, but the shadows linger. You see things out of the corner of your eye, hear whispers that vanish when you turn your head. You start questioning whether the world you live in is real or just another layer of some twisted dream. It started small. At first, I chalked it up to stress, exhaustion, maybe a little too much late-night research on a creepy abandoned building. But the nightmares came with a new intensity, vivid, relentless, and impossible to shake. I'd be lying in bed, eyes wide open, heart pounding, as the same hallway from my dreams stretched out before me. The cracked walls, the flickering lights, the rusted door with the faded sign, Dream Incubation Facility. And then the shadows would move, slow, deliberate, like they were watching me, waiting. Sometimes I'd hear the faint hum of machines, the distant drip of water, or worse, the soft, almost inaudible whisper of a voice calling my name. I started seeing things during the day too. A flicker of movement in the corner of my vision, a shadow that didn't belong. Once, I caught a glimpse of a figure standing just beyond the edge of the streetlight's glow, but when I blinked, it was gone. I joked to myself that I was turning into a walking cliché, the haunted investigator slowly losing their grip on reality. Great, I muttered one morning, staring at my reflection. Just what the internet needs, another guy who talks to shadows. But the humor didn't last long. The dreams began to bleed into my waking life. I'd find myself staring at the ceiling, heart racing, convinced I was still trapped in some endless incubation chamber. I'd catch my reflection in a window and flinch, half expecting to see that shadowy figure, the so-called dream warden from the tapes and forums, lurking behind me. I'm not the only one trapped in this nightmare. I reached out to others who'd been drawn to the facility's dark history. Some shared stories eerily similar to mine. Visions, nightmares, a creeping sense of being watched. Others spoke of waking up in strange places, disoriented and terrified, as if their minds had been pulled through some unseen portal. Have you ever felt like that? Like you're caught between two worlds, neither fully awake nor asleep? Like the ground beneath you is shifting and the shadows are closing in? It's a terrifying place to be. I started keeping a journal, trying to separate dream from reality. But the entries grew more fragmented, more desperate. I'd write about waking up in cold sweats, about hearing voices that no one else could hear, about the creeping dread that settled in my chest like a stone. Friends noticed the change. They asked if I was okay, if I needed help. I brushed it off with a cynical smile. Just chasing ghosts, I told them. Or maybe I'm the ghost now. But inside, I was unraveling. One night, after a particularly brutal dream where the incubation chamber flooded with black water and the shadowy figure reached out to me, I woke up gasping, my body drenched in sweat. I looked around my room, half expecting the nightmare to follow me into the waking world. It didn't, but the fear stayed. I realized then that I couldn't run from this. The facility, the dreams, the darkness, they were part of me now. And if I wanted answers, if I wanted to stop the nightmare from consuming me, I had to go back. Back to the place where it all began. I know it's dangerous. I know I'm risking my sanity, maybe even my life. But some truths are worth the risk. So tomorrow, I'm going back to the Dream Incubation facility. And this time, I'm not just looking for answers. I'm looking for the source of the nightmare itself. Because if I don't face it, I'm afraid it will swallow me whole. And maybe, just maybe, it already has that. I thought I was ready. I wasn't. After days of restless sleep and creeping dread, I returned to the Dream Incubation facility, this time armed with more than just curiosity. I brought a camera, a voice recorder, a notebook filled with frantic scribbles, and a small handheld EMF detector, because if there was anything supernatural lurking in that place, I wanted proof. The sun was setting when I arrived, casting long shadows over the cracked pavement. The building loomed ahead, a hulking silhouette against the darkening sky. The air was colder than before, sharper, as if the facility itself was breathing, waiting. I pushed open the front door, and the familiar groan echoed through the empty lobby. The stale, metallic smell hit me immediately, stronger this time, mixed with something else, something faint but unmistakable: decay. I flicked on my flashlight and started moving, every step echoing in the silence. The EMF detector beeped softly, then louder, as I approached the hallway where I'd first found the hidden stairwell. I paused, heart hammering. The device's light flickered erratically, and a cold breeze brushed past me, though every window and door was sealed tight. Okay, I muttered to myself, trying to steady my nerves. Let's see what you're hiding. I descended the stairs, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the thick darkness. At the bottom, the steel door with the strange symbols awaited. I pressed my hand against it, feeling the chill radiate through my skin. The door creaked open with surprising ease. Inside, the hidden room was just as I'd left it, machines humming faintly, papers scattered, the tape recorder blinking patiently. But something was different. The air felt heavier, charged with an energy I couldn't explain. The shadows seemed to pulse, stretching and contracting like a living thing. I set up my camera and voice recorder, narrating my findings as I went. I flipped through the notebooks, reading passages that described experiments pushing the boundaries of human consciousness, attempts to map the dream world, to control it, to bend it to the will of the researchers. And then I found it. A series of cryptic messages scrawled in the margins, warnings written in a shaky hand. Do not trust the dream, one read. Another, the warden watches. Escape is a lie. A chill ran down my spine. I played the tape again, hoping to catch something I'd missed. As the voice crackled through the speaker, a sudden, sharp noise cut through the room, a metallic clang, like something falling. I spun around, flashlight beam darting wildly. Nothing. But then I saw it, a shadow, darker than the surrounding gloom, flickering at the edge of my vision. I blinked and it was gone. Get a grip, I whispered. It's just your mind playing tricks. But the EMF detector was going wild now, beeping rapidly as if warning me to leave. I pressed on, moving toward a door I hadn't noticed before, half hidden behind a rusted cabinet. It was unmarked, cold to the touch. I hesitated, then pushed it open. Inside was a small chamber, walls lined with strange symbols glowing faintly in the dark. In the center stood a figure, tall, indistinct, shrouded in shadow. "Who's there?" I called out, voice trembling. The figure didn't move, but the air grew thick, heavy with a presence that pressed against my chest. I felt a voice inside my head, not spoken aloud but clear as day. "You shouldn't be here." Panic surged through me, but I forced myself to stay calm. "I'm not leaving until I know the truth." The figure seemed to pulse, shifting between forms, sometimes human, sometimes something else entirely. I raised my camera, trying to capture it, but the lens fogged over, the image distorting into static. "Why are you here?" The voice echoed again, colder this time. "Because I need to understand," I said, voice barely a whisper. The shadow recoiled, then vanished, leaving the room colder than before. I stumbled back into the hallway, heart racing, mind reeling. The facility was alive in a way I hadn't imagined, an entity born from the experiments, feeding on fear and dreams. As I made my way back toward the exit, the EMF detector's beeping slowed, but a new sound emerged, a faint whisper trailing behind me, growing louder with every step. I dared a glance over my shoulder. Nothing, but I knew I wasn't alone. Outside, the night was still, the stars cold and distant. I stepped into the open air, relief flooding me, until I heard it again, a soft, deliberate footstep behind me. I didn't look back, because whatever followed me out of that place wasn't done yet. I thought it was over. I was wrong. When I left the Dream Incubation facility that night, I told myself the nightmare was behind me. I'd faced the darkness, uncovered the secrets, and escaped with my sanity, barely intact, but intact nonetheless. I wanted to believe I could return to normal life, to the world where shadows didn't whisper and walls didn't bleed with memories. But normal didn't come back. The days that followed were a blur of exhaustion and unease. My mind, once sharp and focused, felt foggy, as if the boundary between waking and dreaming had permanently thinned. I'd catch myself staring into space, lost in fragments of that place, the flicker of a shadow, the echo of a voice, the cold touch of something unseen. Physically, I was drained. Sleepless nights left me jittery and weak. My hands trembled when I tried to write, and sometimes, inexplicably, I'd wake up with bruises, dark, irregular marks that no one could explain. Socially, I withdrew. Friends noticed the change, the haunted look in my eyes, the way I flinched at sudden noises. I brushed off their concerns with a cynical joke or a vague excuse, but inside, I was unraveling. There are things I can't unsee, and I'm not alone. Since sharing my story, I've heard from others, people who've experienced similar hauntings, nightmares that refuse to end, shadows that follow them home. Some have even sent me photos and recordings, strange anomalies caught on camera that defy explanation. Our stories weave together, a tapestry of fear and unanswered questions. The Dream Incubation facility wasn't just a place, it was a catalyst, a wound in the fabric of reality that still bleeds. I've revisited some of the previous cases I've covered, looking for connections, patterns. The more I dig, the clearer it becomes. These aren't isolated incidents. There's a larger, darker network at play, experiments, conspiracies, and forces that manipulate the very nature of consciousness. To those of you watching, I want to ask, have you ever felt trapped between worlds? Have you ever woken up and wondered if you were still dreaming? If so, you're not alone. I encourage you to share your experiences, your theories, your warnings. Together, maybe we can piece together the truth before it consumes us all. I'll be keeping you updated as I continue to investigate, but be warned, this path is dangerous. The deeper you go, the darker it gets. And sometimes, the darkness reaches back. So what happens next? That's the question I'm still trying to answer. Because the nightmare isn't over. Not by a long shot. And somewhere, in the shadows, something is waiting. Waiting for the next dreamer to walk through the door.